Hello there. Welcome to my channel. I'm Dylan Fix, the host. I hope you consider subscribing because this is a channel dedicated to all things nerdy. If it has anything to do with nerd stuff, pop culture, I'm sure to talk about it. Today's topic, Star Wars. Let's get started. I don't know what that was. Is it blurry? So with the relatively recent release of the latest Star Wars trailer, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, I've seen a reoccurring problem people are starting to have with the idea of Episode 9, which is, if Palpatine is alive, like the film implies, does that take away from Vader's redemption in the original trilogy? To which I'd have to say, no! Bad! Just looking for problems in a movie that hasn't even come out yet. Just bad! You know better. No, not at all, not in any way, shape, or form, and allow me to explain why. All we have to really do to start poking holes in this idea is to just simply address how the Sith operate with the rule of two. To grossly oversummarize, you have a master and an apprentice. At some point, inevitably, the apprentice is expected to kill the master or die trying and assume the role of master himself, and then start the loop over again. So, going off this idea, it's not really the act of Vader killing Palpatine that is the primary cause of his redemption, because he's already sort of expected to do that at some point. What it really is his rejection of the dark side and choosing to sacrifice himself for someone he loves, someone other than himself, and for something other than just power that is the redemption of Vader's soul. And I know this isn't canon, but I vaguely remember reading an alternate universe comic where Vader actually turns back to the light side and fights alongside Leia with the Resistance against the Empire, and it was done without him killing Palpatine. So it seems like even in the eyes of the people who create these universes, even ones that aren't even canon, believe that Vader could be redeemed without necessarily killing Palpatine, primarily. And the only real reason I think that we're expected to think that it's more to do with it than just that is the idea of the prophecy that was introduced in the prequel trilogy that, if we're being honest, held little to no impact in the original story because it was never even referenced, which leads me to believe that this was just an idea Lucas created last minute in the prequel trilogy just to add more to his new trilogy that he never really thought fully through. That's why it was never applied in the original trilogy. I just don't really think the original trilogy was made with the idea of a prophecy in mind. This was just an idea Lucas had that he just applied last minute, or just because he thought it was a good idea that just didn't really pan out to make much sense. And if we go off the idea of the prophecy and we start adding things up, neither of the trilogies Lucas created really achieved any of the conditions to fulfill the terms of the prophecy. Not really, and I'll explain why in a minute. Now, if we're going off the idea of a prophecy, there's several things we have to take into consideration, but first we have to come to terms with certain things. For this argument, I propose that we cut out everything that is not the movies. I'm talking books, video games, comics, TV shows. If it didn't happen in the movies, we're not going to count it. And this is actually all being done to help the prophecy, so that when I finally break it down, it's going to stay down. Now, if we go off the original interpretation of the Force, where the prophecy is achieved by the complete destruction of the dark side and the Sith, and the primary return of the light side and the Jedi, the prophecy quickly starts to not make sense, because to achieve balance is to have equal parts. The dark side is a part of the Force. The light side is a part of the Force. For you to have entirely one side be in complete control while the other is effectively destroyed, that's not really balance, that's just domination. And that's not really how it's phrased in the prophecy. But if we go for a far more popular interpretation of the prophecy, Anakin actually achieves the prophecy's terms by destroying the Jedi Order and rendering its members down to an equal amount as the Sith Order. 2 Jedi, 2 Sith. Balance. But if we go with this mindset, we have to come to an agreement on something. What we are saying with this, what we have to agree on, is that for balance to be achieved, there has to be an equal number of Jedi, light side users, and Sith, or dark side users. And if we go with that mindset, balance has never been achieved throughout the entire Star Wars saga. Now, I could make this job fairly easy for me by just simply stating that in the Star Wars standalone film Solo, it's revealed that Maul's actually alive. Now, well, that's clearly a problem Disney created. I say nay, nay. Now, this is the only time I'm going to go back on what I've said earlier in this video, because for Maul to be alive, it has to do with the actions of Lucas when he created the Star Wars animated series, The Clone Wars where he, I believe, greenlit the return of Maul. I'm almost 100% positive that Lucas in some way greenlit the return of Maul. So for Maul to be alive, it's due in no small part to Lucas's actions. So that's not a Disney boo-boo, that's a Lucas boo-boo. That's the only time I'm going to go back on what I've said earlier. We're not going to address any of the other canon sources or of the other TV shows, comics, anything like that. Scouts honor. Moving on. But for Maul to be alive during the events of Solo, that means after the Great Jedi Purge and there was effectively only 2 Jedi and 2 Sith, seemingly in balance, Maul was still alive during that time, which meant there was 2 Jedi, 2 Sith, and a dark side user, and the imbalance continues, as per by our agreement earlier. Now we could ignore Maul's addition to this problem, but if we do so, it sort of makes the prophecy sort of irrelevant in terms of usefulness, because as prophecies usually go, once they are achieved, they're usually meant to last a general long period of time. But in the Star Wars universe, if we're going strictly by achieving the terms of the prophecy, sure, the terms can be seen as achieved, but overall, the effects of what the prophecy promises don't really last that long. Not really long enough to be of any significance. It's sort of like a pause between a brawl. Eventually, it just starts back up again, and then you just wonder why the prophecy was even relevant to begin with. And this problem only continues when you get to the end of the original trilogy, where at the end, both Sith are destroyed, Vader and Palpatine, and that leaves only Luke as the last surviving Jedi. Meaning, if we're going by what we agreed on earlier, that there needs to be an equal amount of living dark side users and light side users, the prophecy is still not achieved. But I can hear you now. But if we're going with the added information of the sequel trilogy, doesn't that mean Snoke being alive during this time fills in that void, having a dark side user and a light side user, only 2, one of each, meaning that balance is achieved, but it's immediately followed with Luke going on to create more Jedi. Yes, in the sequel trilogy that's established, but even in the original trilogy, Luke tells Leia he's going to teach her how to use the Force, so he's going to make another light side user, thus restarting the imbalance. But in every version of Luke's story, canon and not canon, Luke always goes on to restart the Jedi Order, therefore causing the imbalance. So the terms of the prophecy are either nullified immediately after they're achieved, which is just sort of pointless, or they're never achieved to begin with. And even when we get to the events of this sequel trilogy, the imbalance is still continued because not only did Luke create more light side users than there were dark side users, but when Kylo goes rogue and destroys Luke's order, he creates more dark side users than there are light side users. Currently, at this point in time of the sequel trilogy, following the events of The Last Jedi into the events of Episode 9, we are at the closest point we have ever been to achieving the full terms of the prophecy, where there is only one light side user, Rey, and only one dark side user, Kylo. I mean, that's not technically true because there is the Knights of Ren that I believe are ex-students of Luke that Kylo took along with him. Let's be honest, they're going to die pretty quickly, and inevitably it's going to come down to Rey and Kylo fighting against Palpatine. And if Kylo contributes in any way to killing Palpatine, it will be done by the bloodline of the Skywalker, which wouldn't even exist without the help of Anakin in the first place. So no, I don't think that the events of the sequel trilogy has in any way taken away from the original or the prequel trilogy. I think that this idea of the prophecy was just a cool idea Lucas had that he just didn't put enough thought into, and it just doesn't amount up to much inevitably in any way, shape, or form. So in summation, I think each of the trilogies should be interpreted as follows. The prequel trilogy is about the fall of Anakin Skywalker and the rise of Vader and the Empire. The original trilogy is about Luke's journey to become a Jedi and the redemption of Darth Vader. The sequel trilogy is about Rey and Kylo's journey to either redeem or corrupt the other and inevitably be forced to unite to bring down the ultimate evil that the galaxy has ever faced once and for all. That does not in any way take away from the events of the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, but I'd love to know your guys' opinion on this matter. Do you think I'm right? Do you see any holes in my logic? I'd love to know. But if you think I'm wrong, please, I'd love to have a debate with you in the comments below, as long as it's respectful. But in the end, these are just my opinions. If you don't like them, sorry. If you like my videos, if you like this channel, if you like this video in particular, I would appreciate a like. And if you want to see more, I'd love a subscribe and have you guys come back for more. I'm a really open-minded kind of guy. I take my audience's opinions into consideration. If you want me to talk about something in particular, comment below, let me know. And as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. See ya.